Kia ora, Year 12. This video is a little bit different from my usual ones because I'm going to be using NZGrapher and PowerPoint. So if you can just be patient with any technical glitches, that would be really nice. So in this video, what I'm going to do is talk first about what we're trying to do with Achievement Standard 2.9. The big idea here is that we're going to be taking a sample from a population and then using that to answer a question about the difference of the medians of two groups in my population. But this video is going to focus a lot on the mechanics of how we do cool stuff in New Zealand in NZGrapher. It's pretty easy, but it's definitely worth playing around with. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to work with a completely made up population of dogs, and we'll get to that soon. And then I'm going to put that into NZGrapher. So there's not actually going to be that much stats in this video. It's mainly going to be computer stuff. All right, so just remember that this is not the first thing that you're going to do in your report. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to have an introduction, you're going to talk about the context and lead up to the investigative question. It's really important that you do all that stuff well, right? You have to ask the question in the right way so that you go on to take the correct next steps. And you have to make a hypothesis based on what you know or based on some research about what you think you might see. But that's not what we're doing here. Okay, so what we are doing here is first we're going to talk about why simple random sampling is a good method, and then I'm going to suggest that you take about 200 values for your sample. Now you can take more, and it will depend a little bit on what you see when you have a go at it, but bigger samples tend to be better. Okay, so this slide, pause the video and just have a read through it. This is really, really important, and then I'm going to talk through the main points. All right, so simple random sampling is a really good method when I've got a list of the whole population, because what I do is I give every member of the population gets a number. And that means that when I do a simple random sample, every member of the population has got an equal chance to get picked into that sample. So that makes it a good method to use. It doesn't have any sampling bias. Right, and I think we've talked about this a little bit in class. If I want to do some analysis of Wellingtonians and whether they are getting enough exercise, it's not a good idea just to go down to Les Mills on a Saturday morning, right? So because by doing that, not every member of the population has an equal chance of being chosen. But when we do a simple random sample, every single person or every dog in this case is going to have an equal chance to be picked. And the good news for us is that NZGrapher will do a simple random sample with the click of one button. So the next thing that we are going to think about is that we're going to have two groups in our sample. So just coming back to these points here though, we need to do a big enough sample, right? So the first thing we do is we think about the method, and the method is simple random sampling. And then we think about the sample size. And that sample size has to be large enough to give us a reliable estimate of the population, right? And we prefer the word reliable to accurate. So I'm going to take 200 members of the population into my random sample because I'm going to be splitting that up into two groups. And I might be going to ditch some values if they're from a third or a fourth or a fifth group. And I have to be really careful not to ever dip below around 30 in a group to be doing my analysis. So if I start off with 200 members of the population in my sample, 200 people in my sample, that should be big enough that I can see patterns. The next thing that I want to go on about, because we see this every year in the standard, is that students get really hung up about problems when the two groups are not exactly the same size, right? And so we might have one N is 50 and we might have one N is, 97. It doesn't matter for being able to do my work, right? So I can have a situation where my samples have different sizes. It is definitely going to affect my analysis because when I do my confidence interval, this one, the one with the 97 dogs or 97 people, is going to have a narrower confidence interval. And that's because the confidence interval margin of error is 1.5 times the interquartile range divided by the square root of n. Now this n is my 97 here. Okay, so when I've got a bigger number here and I take the square root, I'm going to get a smaller margin of error, because this is in the bottom number in the fraction, the denominator. Okay, what else did I want to say here? Oh yeah, I've got to have at least 30 in my group. Okay, so let's move on now, and finally we're going to look at how to get the data into NZGrapher. And then how do I take my sample? And that will probably be it for this first little video. And in the next one, I'm going to look at some cool stuff that you can do depending on the questions you're trying to answer. All right, now this is where I try and switch window. So let me just shut down that for a minute. What I'm going to do now is move over to NZGrapher. Now, I wonder if that's still videoing. I guess it is. I think that's still videoing. You can see here that I've just opened up NZGrapher, and I've just preloaded one of the boring, data sets that they've got in there, right? So we could have anything in there when we start off. That's the marathon one. Now, our job is to go into Google Sheets or into Excel and to get the population that we've been given over into NZGrapher. So for this video, I've made up a totally fake population, which has got dogs in it. And it hasn't got much in it. It's just got the kind of dog, the height of the dog, completely made up, right? So it's kind of random numbers, but a little bit better than that. And then, does the dog like bananas? And we've got a population, and I've made up a population that's got about 10,500 dogs. So it's a massive spreadsheet that goes on and on and on. And you can see there's Chihuahuas and poodles and pugs and St. Bernards and Staffies, because that's my favourite, for obvious reasons, and Alsatians. So heaps and heaps of dogs, and it goes on and on and on and on. Right, so we want to take that over as our population. So to do that, you're going to just put your mouse down and then use the arrow keys and go like this. If you're working on a PC, if you hold down the Shift key and then go Control and then the down arrow, it will get all of the values. And then we're going to go Control C for copy, and we go to NZGrapher. We hop up to data, and my lazy way of doing this is just import from clipboard. And it will take a little while. You can see that we sit here, and now look, all of that dog data has come through in here. Okay, and I'm really hoping that my recorder is still recording my full screen here. So what can we see here? Well, we've got the dog ID number, and then we've got the dog type and the height, and does the dog like bananas? And you can see just how massive this is, and that NZGrapher is handling it fine. Now, in the actual 2.9 internal, you're going to have more variables than this, but it's basically the same idea, right? We don't want to work with this population. So the first thing that we want to do is to say, okay, we're going to take our sample. So we take our mouse and we go up to where it says sample and more, and then we're going to click on sample. We're going to use the simple random sampling method. And as I said in my PowerPoint, I'm going to try a sample size of 200. Now you could try a bit bigger. I once had someone decide that their sample would be the whole population, and we had to fail them, right? Because the point of this standard is to show that you can make an inference when you've got a sample. Okay, so we've got to take a sample here, but we can take quite a decent sized one. So we hit sample, and we're going to lose, instead of having 10,000 dogs, you can see that now it just goes down as far as 200. And we've still got a big mix of dogs. So the next thing that we want to do is to start to decide on what the two groups are going to be. Now, we have to be working with a question about a numeric variable, and there's only one here. So in this case, my question, the first question I'd look at might be to do with the median height for dogs who do like bananas and who don't like bananas. Now, since I did this completely randomly, I wouldn't expect to see much. But to do that, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to choose dot plot, and then it's going to say error. We choose our numerical variable, which is height, and that's going to show me the height of the whole population. Now, remember that is completely made up. So it's going to be pretty hard to tell a good story about it, but we could go through our center and our shape and our spread and all of that. And then we're going to choose, does the dog like bananas or not? And you can see that now NZGrapher has split the data up into two groups, a no group and a yes group. So I recommend that you first talk about this graph with just the dot plot. And once you've done that, then you can put on your box plots. And lastly, you've got your summary numbers here. Okay, and then you're going to work through the rest of the assessment. Moving on to the confidence intervals, forming the confidence intervals, interpreting the confidence intervals, and finally drawing a conclusion. Can I or can I not make a call about whether the median of one group is bigger than the median height of the other group? Okay, I think for this video, I'm going to stop here for now. In the next video, we're going to work with all of these different kinds of dogs and see how we can look at differences in height between two breeds. But I'm going to save that for tomorrow because I want to work out if this video has actually worked how I thought it would. Thanks for watching. Please let me know if this was useful, but be nice because it's a little bit weird doing this kind of video instead of my maths ones.